Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Sean Carey from the Beyond the Practice podcast, and I'm with,
Dr. Bill Moss.
and we are so excited because here we have Dr. Brian Martin, who's a great friend of mine, and he's an amazing ER doctor in Louisiana. And Brian is one of those people that I was instantly impressed with when I first met him. He has a lot of wisdom. He's an incredibly gifted healer, and he was basically the first person we thought of for this podcast about who we want to interview. So, Brian, I was hoping you would just give us a little bit of your background, maybe like kind of where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you became an ER doctor.
Sure. Kind of a long story. It was a round trip there. So I actually started off in high school as an EMT. And when I went to college for electrical engineering. And in my third year, I had the opportunity to take a year off and go to paramedic school.
Wow.
I went to paramedic school, and from that point on, I was hooked. Went back, decided I wasn't going to finish out my engineering degree, and went to PA school. So I was a physician assistant after being a paramedic.
Wow.
After a couple of years of doing that, then I went on to med school and have been a practicing ER doc since 2004.
Wow. That's incredible. And what was the moment that kind of hooked you when you were like, oh, this is something that I don't know if it's that you just love, and that there's, I imagine, such a rush from when you're helping people in that setting.
Yeah, it's sort of a two-part question. The medicine part was the helping people, being able to do something for other people to ease their suffering. The field I chose, emergency medicine, was just a continuation of being a paramedic in the field.
Yeah.
It was, excitement, not knowing what was going to come through the doors next, and just continuing with that.
Yeah. And you always have to be on like always on your A game, right? And it's like you have to be prepared for anything, which I have huge admiration for you guys for what you do every day.
Yes. One of the things ER docs commonly talk about is the fear of losing their gut. Their gut feeling is what they're referring to. Because so much of what we do is with very little to no information that we're making that decisions on. And it truly is a lot of times from your gut.
Wow.
It was a natural segue into studying spirituality, because that really enhanced that ability.
Yeah, I heard one time somebody said, like, the U.S. healthcare system is so advanced in like our emergency care, and I heard somebody offer this perspective, like emergency room and emergency care is so strong because it's like you're not even, I don't want to say this like from a cynical standpoint, you don't care as much how they're feeling. You're like doing what you have to do, and it makes you kind of like more laser focused to do the job in a certain way, as opposed to getting into your brain and thinking like all of the possibilities in that moment. Is that something you've experienced? Yeah,
I agree with that, but if you're not doing it or in the medical field, that could be taken different ways.
Yeah.
And it's not so much that we don't care, but in the moment of it, it's you have to compartmentalize it so that you're able to do the job and actually take care of the person in front of you.
Yeah.
And then you go home and you process what happened through the day.
We had that conversation, Bill and I did on one of our first podcasts, where we were talking about how chiropractic really helped prepare us for some of the spiritual work, because there's this aspect of like, you could be having a bad day or something's going wrong. Maybe your X-ray machine's down, or, you get some big bill or something goes wrong. And you have to be able to develop this skill set of just letting your mind kind of empty and putting your emotions aside and just showing up for the person who's in front of you. And that really supported us, and it supported me in becoming a spiritual guide, because I was able to step into that mode of, it's not about me. It's about the person who's in front of me and what they need. And I think that's a really useful skill to have as a healer.
It is. And along with that and the training comes the ability to not let the things actually affect you. So you're not taking them on either.
Yeah.
So you can keep a clear mind.
At what point in your career did you really start to delve into the spiritual realms to support you in the work that you were doing?
I've always described myself as the most traditional doctor you'll ever meet. So long before I even went to med school, I was looking into all the alternative healings and practices that were out there. And then when I was practicing traditional medicine, I was always looking for more than what's the way traditional medicine takes care of people. It's become very much a problem-based, disease-diagnosed field. And I think there's a lot more to medicine that can get people to actually live great lives, not just keep them from suffering, but to live their full potential. I sort of got into it much heavier, much heavier when I ended up having some health issues. I was at the World Trade Center for 9/11. And about a year, 2 years after that, I started developing some neurological issues. I started developing a pseudotumor cerebri, and I had gone to see different doctors, and luckily enough came upon a physician who was actually doing research on neurological diseases that they were seeing in a lot of the responders to the World Trade Center. So he sort of guided me along on where to seek treatments. I had access to all of the top traditional medical treatments. The problem with pseudotumor is that you build up pressure. It's like it's pseudotumor because it's a liquid that you produce too much fluid in your brain, and it compresses the nerves, and eventually you go blind if you don't have a shunt put in. I'd gone to 3 of the top neurosurgeons, and they all said, you need a shunt, but you're going to need to have it redone probably 3 times in the next 10 years, and you're still going to end up blind. And that just wasn't an acceptable answer. At that time, I was looking around for alternatives, and a friend of mine said, you want to go with me to this presentation on meditation? So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go along with it. I was looking into something that I didn't know much about. And it turned out to be a guide from the Modern Mystery School who was giving the presentation. And the meditation was like just amazing. So I was talking to him afterwards, and he explained the path of spirituality and offered, if we got 5 people, he would come back the next week and teach us Empower Thyself, which was the initial step in the stepping onto the path of getting to know yourself. That's how I started to the spirituality. During that class, I had a master Reiki teacher in the class, massage therapist. It just happened to be a couple of different people that practiced other aspects of healthcare.
Yeah.
And I had asked them what should I look into that I wouldn't know about to try and help heal my vision. And 2 of them had said, you need to go see Sue Ananian for an esophageal Reiki. So I got the information from him, and lo and behold, she lives in the town over I grew up in. Her and my parents now live maybe a half a mile apart in the same town.
Wow.
So I made an appointment to see her, got on a plane and flew up there and started getting esophageal Reiki and etheric surgery sessions. And the effect was just immediate. Like I could see improvements in my vision. And from that point on, I decided I was just going to keep going and learn all I can. It's been pretty amazing. as I went along this field, I got more into functional medicine and restorative medicine as opposed to traditional medicine. One of the common themes that is taught over and over again, that there's a triad to being healthy. And there's diet and exercise, there's traditional medicine, but the missing component that they never teach, but they always mention is spirituality. And without having that connection to source, you never can obtain the optimum you. You don't reach your fullest potential.
Absolutely.
So it's been eye-opening.
That's such an incredible story, Brian. And like one of the things you shared at the beginning too was this how this process helped you with your intuition, or I'm sorry, how important your intuition was, because when somebody comes into the ER, like they may be unconscious, you may know nothing about their history, so it's that gut feeling. And one of the things that drove me to the mystery school work as well was that I'd be working with clients sometimes, and sometimes people would come in, they might have like a chronic type of musculoskeletal pain, and I might have the different MRIs, they've x-rayed all these things, and it was like what they were experiencing just wasn't matching up to what we were seeing objectively. So they might be having deep, intense pain, but wasn't always deep structural issues going on. And those cases, like I didn't feel like the person was lying or anything like that. It was just like there's something being missed, and that was something that really like was like an itch in the back of my mind for a long time. And when I started exploring this for my own healing and growth, for me, it was a Kundalini awakening that led to like a spiritual health crisis that led to me meeting a mystery school guide. And I started realizing that, that thing that had bothered me before, where people weren't getting better, there's an emotional or spiritual or energetic component, and it's just not being acknowledged or understood. And then once I started introducing different energetic healings and sessions that we learned through the mystery school, like people started releasing huge amounts of like emotional and energetic pain that was really affecting them physically.
Yes, it's in traditional medicine we refer to like the energetic field that you're talking about working in as subtle energies, and it's just slowly getting to be more and more recognized that we do have this energy field around us and in our body. And our body is made up of an electrical field and frequencies.
Yeah.
And that's information that has been known through all the ages.
Yeah.
It's just when science came about, it wasn't something they could actually prove and see, and it fell out of favor. And now it's funny how it makes a full circle, and it's coming back now.
Absolutely.
Traditional science is starting to realize, hey, there is truth to this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, when I first started doing the energy work or receiving life activation initiation, I definitely noticed how my relationship with the person in front of me started to change in multiple ways. And the fact that like, I wasn't taking on their stuff as readily. And in addition, I was more able to connect on a level that was kind of beyond some of the superficial, almost like the way Sean was saying, you know, it wasn't the obvious x-ray or, you know, a structural physical problem. But there was still these barriers that kind of allowed me to cut through. How have you noticed, you know, that relationship with the people you work with change over the years as you've developed, grown, walked further on the path?
It's interesting you bring this up because just last weekend, I've sort of become known as the attending that likes the weird patients, the ones that others would think are difficult.
Okay.
So one of the residents I presented a patient to me that just wasn't making sense, and you know, it was frustrating to them. And I just had this gut. If she came out with a severe headache, was pregnant, was worried about a bleed, all the symptoms for that. And the gut feeling was, she's got a corneal abrasion. Don't know why, but that's just the feeling I got. Let's check her eye. And as soon as we put the anesthetic drop in her eye, all her symptoms cleared up. And she had been to her doctor, to another ER,
Yeah.
and then came to us because nobody could get rid of this worsening headache. And lo and behold, that's where it was from. And I had no reason to suspect that's what it was.
Yeah.
That's that gut feeling that we talk about. And that's been greatly enhanced since studying spirituality.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's awesome. I love it because a lot of times people think intuition or sensing or being able to kind of read a situation in that way is out there, right? Like, oh, you have this extra sensory perception that nobody has, and it can be used, but it is kind of like in the moments where we don't use our mind as much, sometimes we do get the answers. Because I think Sean and I were talking about this, how, when you've done something long enough, you develop your craft, and then all of a sudden, it's like by knowing the rules, you can break the rules. And the more you're in that rhythm of what you're doing, the more you can kind of rely on those senses. So thanks for sharing that story. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a really cool story. In chiropractic, both Bill and I are big fans of chiropractic history. And one of the developer of chiropractic, he wrote a lot of books, and he was an incredibly gifted chiropractor and had a research hospital, traveled the world, all sorts of amazing things. But he talked about the adjustment with the special something. So being able to give like this most perfect adjustment. And this special something, I think, was really this spirit, this higher energy of spirit that you're able to bring through when you're having a connection with the person in front of you, and then being able to do an adjustment from that place. And I imagine it's very similar too for you or any other type of healer, where there's this kind of bridge that can happen between you and your patient or client, where you just kind of become one or connect on a really deep level, so that you can provide them a much higher level of care. And that's your story reminded me of that.
Yeah, but it's true, because you're communicating with your words, but that's a very small percentage of actually how you're communicating.
Yeah.
The other people, always think of, well, it's your facial expressions, your body habitus, but there's also coming from your heart. When you come from your heart and make that connection with a patient, that immediately puts them at ease, and lets them know that you truly are here to try and help them.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more to like making that connection with patients that may never be obvious on the outside.
Yeah. And over, like, I don't know if you've noticed this, but over the last 20 years, don't you feel like people are slightly more attuned to that aspect of who they're working with? And almost like we're picking up as society, like we're picking up on the feelings between the practitioner and the doctor, where maybe that didn't matter as much. Like the title was of a certain nature, the education level, but people are actually like, on a level they want to connect and have that connection with the person that they're working with. Because, we can all probably stand here and be like, it absolutely matters. It allows each person to enter that relationship more authentically. But I feel like people are quicker to kind of sense that if you're in that or if you're not.
Yes, I think very much so. I think in general, humanity in general is actually starting to open up to it a lot more.
Yeah. And what the gifts we have is for being able to do this work. Like the more we can open up and develop ourselves, and the more we can go through our own healing and our own breakthroughs and awareness and self-knowledge, the more we can access those higher states more of the time, so that we can really become the best healer possible. Because like, if you hadn't done all this training that you've done, Brian, like you probably wouldn't have thought of the corneal abrasion in that case. It was so far out there. Maybe you wouldn't have had the confidence in your gut. I don't want to speak for you, but that's what I imagine.
Yeah, and even more so, I'm not sure I would have been tuned into my gut enough to have even been aware that that was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
That's awesome. When did they start seeing that? They're like, oh, here's, give this case to Brian. He's like,
It probably started in some of the weird cases of like either endocrine or hormonal abnormalities, which part of the functional medicine, rehab medicine, teaches you to just looking at things a lot different, not what the labs say is normal, but actually what's optimal is the difference between traditional and rehab. Restorative medicine, I'm sorry. So I think that's where it first started, like thinking outside of the box. And very much in the beginning of your medicine, you're going by the textbooks and what they teach you. And as you learn, you can expand from there, and you start recognizing patterns, and you start putting things together. And then you say, well, this doesn't truly fit this pattern. I can make it fit in that box, but it really doesn't belong there. And then you can start looking a little deeper for where it is.
I love it.
Now, has your work in the functional medicine or in the spiritual world, have people you've worked with kind of been more drawn to it, more open to it, since your background and you kind of bringing some of that within the work that you do?
With ER work, so far I've found most of the spirituality comes into, it's more in me than it's actually in stuff that I do.
Okay.
Don't really have the time in the ER to treat things with the spirituality and the energy, the healings.
Yeah.
That's more so a quick hands-on. But there are certain patients that, having that discussion that, hey, there's more out there that you sensed are open to it and would benefit from it. I think that absolutely makes a difference.
And I think that goes back to that trusting the person, like trusting the provider, and that's somebody that really cares about them, like we were talking about. And like when you really care about your clients, you really care about your patients. For the different sessions the different energy sessions that I've done with people, oftentimes I feel like I don't say the right words. I don't always communicate it very well, because it's very hard to communicate something that's so outside the norm of what we're used to for some of these ancient energy healings. But just looking at somebody and looking at the heart and be like, I think that this would help you. I think it would be good for you. And for me, that really just like caring about the person, having that connection, and me believing that help the people to be like, okay, I'll give it a try. And so many people like that really helped, but it was just through that connection.
I'm curious, sorry. No, go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
That's where the nonverbal comes in, because the words that you're saying, you're recommending something that's pretty much always going to be a new concept to people. And some of it's going to sound pretty far out there. And depending on the energy that you're saying it with, that can either be there's immediate trust there, and your patient trusts that this will work. Or you can sound like a salesman that's trying to just push the next thing. And that's where coming from the heart and connecting, truly from one human to the other, is us all being the same. That establishes that trust.
I'm curious about when you first, you showed up at that meditation night. You were dealing with this, this pretty serious condition, and people are kind of giving you the prognosis over the next 10 years, and you show up to this thing, and the one piece leads to the next piece, which leads to what were you thinking like during that time, and as you saw your body respond and heal. What was that like to go from this, highly medical mind and work that you were doing to you're seeing how all this works? I'm just curious what that felt like.
It was, part of it felt familiar and comfortable because I've always believed there was more to medicine, that we were missing a piece. So this had the potential of being that piece.
Yeah.
And the other part of it was, I wanted to know how this worked. And I wanted the scientific details like they teach you in med school of this is what it is, this is how it works, and this is what you should expect when you see that. And it's not like that. Definitely not like that. That was hard to accept.
Especially as somebody with the background of being like an electrical engineer and paramedic, and not just such precision. And I have huge admiration for that way of thinking. One of my chiropractic mentors was also an engineer too, and just but also just had that attention to detail, and then also blended the spiritual and energetic awareness, and just became an absolute master because of it.
Yeah, it's getting to that point. I mean, that's, I think, what we're all striving to, because I think coming from the scientific background, it's very much left-brained. And learning to open up the right brain, which is so much faster than the left brain.
Yeah.
When you can do both of them together, you truly are reaching the pinnacle up there, being like a great healer.
Absolutely.
And we all have the ability to do it. That's the beauty of this.
That's awesome. No, your blend is like an inspiration, because even the culture talks in terms of like those two ideas coming together can be very separate. And it's like when people are the ones that kind of bring that together the best, not just scientific concepts. It's like you're this nice living proof of how they can be intertwined and meshed and really understood, because many times we just compartmentalize them to be like it's either or, instead of being on the same kind of line, just at different points. So
right.
It's very inspiring for sure.
Another thing I really appreciate about you, Brian, too, is that when that was about your journey, is that you were told basically an unfortunate outcome by 3 of the top neurosurgeons in the country, and you knew who they were through your field, and I'm sure you had all like connections to get to the best ones, but you were like, no, there has to be something else. Like there has to be something better, and you kept searching. And sometimes I see people where it's like they've kind of just accepted a diagnosis, and maybe there's just a provider told them, it was like, oh, your situation's hopeless, essentially. And I think oftentimes the people's situation aren't hopeless. Like maybe we don't have the answer to it with chiropractic, or maybe we don't have the answer to it with emergency medicine, but maybe traditional Chinese medicine does, or maybe acupuncture does, or there are these other, or energy healing does, or functional medicine does. And I think sometimes people just are too quick to accept the box as far as their label with their health condition, as opposed to really like kind of pushing against it and be like, okay, let me try some of these other things.
I agree with that. It can become a crutch that gets used to not make the changes, because changes work. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
100%. There's a perfect reason not to.
Yeah.
And I credit my parents for putting that. I was a diabetic when I was I became diabetic when I was 1 year old. And back then, all the teachings were, you can't do phys ed, can't go out and play because it'll make your sugar go too low and stuff. And my parents were like, you can do everything your brothers and sisters do, and you're gonna do everything your brothers and sisters do. And that just installed in me that it's not a defect, it's not who you are.
Yeah.
It's just something you have. So it plays through even now. Even the cases that you see that, look like you think to yourself, there's no way
Yeah.
this person's going to ever be able to overcome this.
Yeah.
But then as you go through the spiritual training and realize that we all have the ability to heal ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't,
Absolutely.
in reality, I don't heal anybody.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't make them better. I give them the tools that they need to get better, and their body makes themselves better. And I show them how to do it. But I'm not making them better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like the ultimate lesson in healing, and I always know, with the spiritual work, it's allowed us to like look at a person completely differently, knowing who they are and who they aren't, and that they're capable, right? Like you even describing your parents looking at you and being like, that's nice, you have some challenges, but you know what? I know you're beyond that. And that space is like the ultimate space to hold, I think, with people and recognize where the healing come from. It's a very empowering position. I mean, it's really cool.
Yeah. And a lot of times the patients don't even realize what you see in them.
Yeah.
But just by holding that space, it gives that a chance to become a reality. Whereas if I'm sorry to tell you, this is going to be what life's going to be like.
Yeah.
You're not holding any space for them anymore. You're just closing their world down on them, and it's probably is what's going to happen. So they don't have to recognize it at that point, but you hold that energy, and they recognize that deep down.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. Brian, if there was if you could just share one piece of healing wisdom for like a client who's been suffering for a while, is there anything that comes to mind, like maybe a lesson that was difficult for you to learn about healing that you'd like to share with somebody else?
Top of my head, I'm not drawing anything profound.
I remember like when I graduated chiropractic school, I was I had very much had this I was like so alternative, if you will, that I really like kind of avoided anything medical. And I ended up getting I got sick. I had Lyme disease, and then I had toxic mold poisoning like back to back. And there was this period of time where it was I was just like really, really suffering. And my body was really depleted. I was going to bed at probably like 8:30 at night, and then waking up and seeing clients the next day, because if I didn't, I would have lost my business. And that was going on for months. And during that time, I ended up like developing this skill set where I was able to really like will myself. Like my body was not doing what it was supposed to do, but I could really engage my will to like get me through the day and get me through the next thing. And it really was this really difficult trial or lesson, but of like really strengthening my will to be able to use that towards healing. And, since that experience, this is maybe 6 years ago, I've really been able to apply my will. And if when I was didn't feel good or something like that, I could just keep going. I've never been like floored again the way I was before, but it took that really difficult experience of just having to get up over and over again and keep pushing.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that because that's pretty much how I look at the diseases and health issues that I've come across. You can either give in and have it determine your life, or you can, hey, I create my own reality, and I'm not letting this control me and decide how I'm going to live my life. And even on those days where the last thing you want to do is get out of bed or get off that couch because it hurts too much and you don't have that energy.
Yeah.
by the end of the day, you've accomplished something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a boost in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the big pieces is like people don't realize doctors like yourself or you were sharing, Sean, like we all go through this too. We all get challenged on it's easy to talk and be like, you're your own healer and the healing comes from you, but on those days or those months or those weeks where it's shitty, like it's hard, it's really hard. But I think that's probably, I feel like that gives me the ability to reflect to another person. Like I totally can actually relate to what's going on with you. And I feel like that's got to be in you for your story to like who's coming through that you can't relate to on some degree, some level, based on your own experience. And I'm sure that served you all over this time.
Yeah.
Very much so. Very much so. Not only in just knowing what it's like to be on the other side,
Yeah.
and be the patient and not the practitioner, the healer. Also in knowing all those other things that go along with having a health challenge that is not the disease process in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that compassion that develops through our journey too. It's like you have those down days or those sicknesses or whatever's going on, and it helps you to be more compassionate for those people in front of you.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Yeah. And also be really, when you're going through it, you're like, oh my gosh, I just wish I could feel better so I could have, on the other side of that, have more energy, feel good. And when it happens, it's like, how grateful are you? It's kind of like living in the Northeast in the winter. People are like, they get a sunny day and they're like, oh my God, life is going to be so much better. And you realize how the darkness and the gloomy days were preparing you all along for this enjoyable spring. So I feel like that's what we're all kind of doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some things I miss about living on the East Coast, but
Yeah.
cold weather is not one of them.
Yeah, the 4:30 p.m. sunsets up here, when it's 20
Exactly.
degrees, pretty brutal.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll take my 85 degrees.
Yeah, and half the time spring feels like it's a battle between winter and summer, and winter's winning most of the way.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's so funny. It's like you can find evidence of the whole in the parts, right? It's like almost the same thing when people are going through a healing crisis and journey. So, knowing your story and everything you've gone through, Brian, say you're working with or you're speaking to like a practitioner. What's been like, if you had one thing that's kind of a theme for you right now that you feel is important to, help healers on their healing journey, if you want to call it advice for sure, or just something that's like, trending in your world, like what's something relevant right now that you feel is important for people who are on a healing journey or are healers?
So people that are healers, I would say it's have an open mind. And you don't have to accept what's being presented, but listen to it and see if there's any validity or something in there that you can use. If it goes against what you've been taught, look at the two and say why, especially if you're having a huge negative reaction immediately, because there's more to that than that you're not acknowledging. And for the patient's side, I'd say never give up hope. You have so much more power than you realize. Don't give up that hope. If you're not getting the results you want from the hero that you're currently seeing, seek out another one or an alternative one. We don't know everything. And there are fields that I know nothing about, but Dr. B down the block may be the world expert on it. And although I have nothing further to offer, he may have exactly what you need. So don't ever give up hope. Keep looking and searching.
That's awesome.
And if we took that advice to heart, like as a nation in the world, we would have such a different healthcare system. Like the U.S., it's just such a difficult healthcare system right now for the patients and the practitioners.
Yeah.
But if we were able to, as practitioners, keep an open mind to all these different things. I know I was closed-minded before. I thought like alternative was the better way, and now I'm like I've been sick where I needed traditional things many times, and it was an absolute lifesaver.
Me too.
And but just freeing those boxes of those limitations that get created, and realizing that there's a really big world. Healing is it's complex and it's also simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But keep exploring, keep pushing, keep looking, and it'll make you a better healer. It'll make you get better results as a client.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, we appreciate you taking time to share your story and inspire, healers and people who are going through healing journey as well. So thanks for being on with us, Brian.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. We're all here to learn, and this was a great experience.
Thank you so much, Brian. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in a couple weeks too in Toronto.
Yes.
And, so that'll be awesome. And I was hoping you could share for anybody that's listening. Dr. Brian's in Shreveport, Louisiana. If you could share your website, or if anybody's interested in doing healing work with you, because you have some incredible modalities that you offer.
It's drbrianmartin.org is the website, and just put an offer on a center that was accepted. So shortly I'll be announcing where the new center is going to be.
Congratulations.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Amazing. Awesome. Yeah, so if you're listening to this and you're in the Louisiana area, please check out Dr. Brian. He's a really gifted healer.
So awesome. Yeah, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you in Toronto.
Thank you. See you soon, Brian.
Yeah.